"You shouldn't tease a man like me," said the mafia boss. She thought he was just a hot tourist. The 8 o'clock sun was already a hammer blow in San Villano, promising another day of scorching sidewalks and melting tourists. For Nina Rivera, it just meant more sweat. She propped the service door of the seaside cafe open with a sand-filled jug, the hinges groaning in protest. The smell of stale beer and old fryer oil wafted out to mix with the fresh, salty air coming off the ocean. She was already exhausted. Nina had been on her feet since 5, taking the early bus to open the cafe, and she would not be off them until her double shift ended well after sundown. At 24, she wore her beauty like an inconvenience, scraped back in a tight bun that did nothing to hide the deep, bruised-looking shadows under her eyes. She was a ghost haunting her own life, a blur of motion dedicated to one thing: survival. Her life was a ledger of debts. There was the rent on their tiny, water-stained apartment. There was the ever-growing pile of medical bills for her abuela, whose lungs were failing as slowly and surely as the plaster in their bathroom. And then there was Mateo, her 16-year-old brother, who was starting to look at the wrong people for fast money. His teenage swagger, a thin veil over a boy's fear. Nina's tips were the flimsy dam holding back the flood, so she smiled when she wanted to scream, refilled coffee cups when she wanted to throw them, and navigated the endless, sticky tables of the cafe. He came in at 10:30. During the mid-morning lull, the bell over the door chimed, and Nina, wiping down the counter, did not even look up. "Just one," a voice said. It was low, with a gravelly texture that vibrated right through the soles of her worn-out sneakers. She finally looked. He was not the usual tourist. The others wore bright, garish shirts and carried cameras. This man wore a pair of dark, perfectly tailored linen trousers and a crisp white shirt. The sleeves rolled up to reveal deeply tanned forearms. His hair was black and thick. His face a collection of sharp angles and shadows, dominated by a mouth that looked like it could be cruel or kind with equal ease. He wore expensive-looking sunglasses, but he slid them off as he approached, revealing eyes so dark they were almost black. He smiled, a slow, predatory flash of white. "A table with a view, if you have one." "They all have a view," Nina said flatly, grabbing a menu. "It's a seaside cafe." His smile widened, crinkling the corners of his intense eyes. He was handsome, dangerously so, in a way that set every one of Nina's alarms ringing. Men who looked like that were trouble. They expected things. They took things. "Then I'll take this one," he said, sliding into the booth nearest the counter. Her section. "And you can bring me a black coffee. Luca?" Nina paused, order pad in hand. "Excuse me?" "My name. It's Luca. And you are?" "Your waitress." She scribbled Bulkoff on her pad. "I'll be right back with that." She turned, feeling his gaze on her back. Hot and heavy as the summer pavement. He was flirting, and she was having none of it. She had neither the time nor the energy for men, especially not the ones who looked like they broke things for a living. Luca Romano did not mind her dismissal. He was, in fact, intrigued. He was supposed to be lying low, enjoying the sun, a ghost in a town full of ghosts. San Villano was the perfect hiding spot, a bright, loud, shallow place where no one looked beneath the surface. He was meant to be relaxing, recovering from the failed assassination attempt that had left 3 bullet holes in his car and his organization in turmoil. He was the underboss of the Romano family, and he was being hunted. But relaxation bored him. And this woman, this exhausted waitress with the eyes of a soldier, did not. He watched her for the next hour. He nursed his coffee and just watched. He saw her patience, a thin, fraying wire, as a tourist family let their children throw sugar packets on the floor. He saw her grit as she hauled a bus tub heavy enough to make a man grunt. And then he saw her fire. A man in a cheap suit, a local businessman by the look of him, was complaining at the register. His voice was rising, a self-important whine. "I'm telling you, this charge is wrong. I did not order the extra bacon. Are you trying to steal from me?" A younger waitress, a teenager named Sophia with braces and a perpetual blush, was ringing him up. She looked terrified, on the verge of tears. "Sir, it's right here on the check." "Are you calling me a liar?" he blustered. Before the manager could intervene, Nina was there. She did not raise her voice. She did not smile. She simply moved between the man and the girl, her body a sudden, unmovable shield. "There seems to be a misunderstanding, sir," she said, her voice quiet but carrying the sharp edge of a blade. "The extra bacon is $3. I've taken it off your bill. You can pay the new total." She slid the revised check toward him. The man deflated, his bully's courage vanishing in the face of her cold competence. "Well, yes, fine." He paid and left, and Nina put a hand on Sophia's shoulder, a quick, firm squeeze. "You're fine. Go take your break." Luca sat back, swirling the last of his coffee. Oh, he thought. She was not just resilient, she was a protector. He knew that kind of strength. It was the kind forged in pain, the kind that hid a multitude of scars. He felt an unwelcome, unfamiliar pull. He wanted to know what had put those scars there. Nina's shift ended at 9. The sun had long since dipped into the Pacific, leaving the sky a bruised purple. Her feet ached, her back ached, and her tips had been mediocre. She walked the 6 blocks to her apartment, her route taking her away from the glittering tourist strip and into the dim, working-class streets where the real San Villano lived. She heard the footsteps behind her and tensed, her hand tightening on the strap of her bag. "Nina. Hey, Nina, wait up." She did not have to turn around. She knew that voice. Ray, her ex, a failed boxer with a failed life, who had decided she was the source of all his problems. "Leave me alone. Ray," she said, walking faster. The street was empty, the lampposts casting weak, yellow pools of light. He jogged to catch up, grabbing her arm. His grip was meaty, his breath sour with beer. "Come on, baby. Don't be like that. I just want to talk. We have nothing to talk about." She tried to yank her arm free, but he held on. "Who was that guy at the cafe today, huh? The one in the nice shirt. You think you're better than me now. Let go of me." "You're mine. Nina, you always were." "I am not," she hissed, finally ripping her arm away. "Anything of yours." She half ran the last block, fumbling for her keys, her heart hammering against her ribs. She did not look back to see if he was following. From the shadows of an outdoor cantina across the street, Luca watched the entire exchange. He had been having a quiet dinner, or trying to. He saw the man grab her. He saw the fear she tried to mask with anger. He saw her run. When Ray turned and swaggered back toward the bars, Luca quietly dropped a handful of bills on his table and stood. He followed Ray for 3 blocks, melting into the shadows, a hunter in his natural element. He did not want to be seen, not yet, and he just wanted to know where this man lived, where he drank, who he was. He watched until Ray stumbled into a dive bar called the Salty Dog, and then he turned and walked back to his hotel. He needed to make sure she was safe. The next day, Luca was back. He sat in the same booth at the same time. When Nina approached, her face was a tight mask of professional indifference. "Black coffee?" she asked. "Please," he said. His gaze was different today. Less playful, more intense. It lingered on the faint marks on her arm, barely visible, where Ray had grabbed her. She instinctively pulled her sleeve down. He did not flirt. He did not smile. He just drank his coffee and watched her, as if he were a bodyguard on duty. It unnerved her more than the flirting had. Other men looked at her with hunger, or with pity, or with the casual dismissal of a customer. This man looked at her as if he saw her, as if he saw the exhaustion and the anger and the fear, and was not put off by any of it. He left a $50 bill for a $4 coffee and was gone before she could give it back. That night, she was not so lucky. Ray was waiting for her, leaning against the door of her apartment building. "You're avoiding me, Nina," he said, blocking her path. "Get out of my way, Ray. I saw your fancy man again today. Tipped you good, did he? What'd you have to do for it?" The implication was ugly, and it hit its mark. Nina's face flushed with rage. "You're disgusting." "He's not going to stick around," Ray sneered, stepping closer. "Guys like that, they use girls like you and they leave, but I'm still here. Nina, I'm always going to be here. You and me, we're the same. We are nothing alike." He reached out, brushing his knuckles against her cheek. She flinched. A violent, full-body recoil. His eyes darkened. "You better remember who you belong to. I'd hate for something to happen to little Mateo. He's walking home from practice in the dark these days, isn't he?" Ice water flooded Nina's veins. It was not a question. It was a threat. "You stay away from him," she whispered, her voice shaking with a fury that was part fear. "Then you be nice to me." He smiled, a rotten, triumphant grin, and finally stepped aside. Nina scrambled into the building, her hands shaking so badly she could barely get her key in the lock. Later that night, Luca found Ray in the alley behind the Salty Dog. Ray was drunk, pissing against the brick wall. "Ray," Luca said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the night air. Ray zipped up, spinning around. "Who the hell are you?" Luca stepped out of the shadows. He wore a dark suit now, no longer the tourist. He looked like what he was, an executioner. "You like to threaten women, Ray? You like to threaten kids?" Luca said, walking slowly toward him. Ray put up his fists, a sloppy, drunken boxer's stance. "I don't know what you're—" Luca moved faster than Ray could even see. 1 second he was 3 feet away. The next his hand was around Ray's throat, slamming him against the brick wall. The impact knocked the air from Ray's lungs. "Listen to me," Luca whispered, his voice a silk-wrapped razor. He applied just enough pressure to make Ray's eyes bulge. "I'm not going to tell you again. You will not go near Nina Rivera. You will not say her name. You will not look at her brother. You will not even breathe the same air she does." Ray clawed at Luca's hand. He was strong, but Luca's grip was steel. "To you," Luca continued, his face inches from Ray's, "she is a ghost. And if I hear that you have bothered her, if I even hear that you've looked in her direction, I will come back. And I will not just choke you. I will reach into your chest and I will rip out your pathetic, cowardly heart. Do you understand me?" He released his grip, and Ray crumpled to the ground, gasping and choking. "I didn't say who I was," Luca said, smoothing the front of his suit, "because it doesn't matter. I'm the man who will end you. Now get out of this town. I don't want to see your face in San Villano tomorrow." He watched Ray scramble to his feet and run, stumbling over a pile of trash bags. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing back into the night. Across the street from her apartment, in the penthouse suite of the San Villano Grand, Luca stood on his balcony, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He was watching her window. The lights were on, inside. Nina had finally broken. She was sitting at her small kitchen table, her face buried in her hands. She was not sobbing. It was worse than that. It was a silent, shuddering collapse, her shoulders shaking with the weight of Ray's threat, the medical bills, Mateo's future, the sheer, crushing exhaustion of it all. Luca watched, his jaw tight, a muscle ticking. He had seen violence his whole life. He had caused most of it. But this quiet suffering, it twisted something inside him. He felt a dark, possessive anger, and something else. Arousal. It shocked him. It was not the simple lust of a man for a beautiful woman. It was a deeper, more complex pull. He was aroused by her strength, by the way she took every hit the world threw at her and refused to stay down. He wanted to shield her. He wanted to own her. He wanted to be the only man who could make her fall apart, and the only one who could put her back together. He lifted the whiskey to his lips, his eyes never leaving her window. The rain started just after midnight, a soft, warm drizzle that quickly became a torrential downpour. The wind howled off the ocean, and the lights in Nina's building flickered, then died, plunging her into darkness. She swore. Her breakdown interrupted. "Abuela?" Her grandmother's apartment was on the 6th floor, and her breathing machine had a battery backup, but not for long. Nina grabbed a flashlight and her keys and ran out into the hallway, heading for the stairs. But in her panic, she forgot. The emergency light in the stairwell was broken. She would have to risk the elevator. She got in, the metal box smelling of mildew, and pressed the button for 6. The elevator groaned, lurched upwards, and then, with a sickening jolt, stopped dead between floors. The darkness was total. "No, no, no," Nina whispered, slamming her hand on the buttons. Nothing. The alarm bell was dead. The phone was dead. She was trapped. She felt the walls closing in, the air thickening. Panic, cold and sharp, began to crawl up her throat. She'd been in there for 10 minutes, her breathing quickening, when she heard a scraping sound from above. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling. "Anyone in there?" The voice was deep, muffled. It was his voice. Yes, I'm here, I'm stuck." "Okay," the voice said, impossibly calm. "Stay back from the doors." She heard a metallic groan and then a grunt of effort. A sliver of light appeared as the inner doors were forced apart, then the outer doors. Luca was crouched on the floor above, prying the doors open with his bare hands. He was soaked to the skin, his white shirt plastered to his chest, revealing the hard, defined muscles beneath. "You're going to have to climb," he said, extending a hand down to her. She looked at the gap. It was a long way up, but the elevator felt like a coffin. She took his hand. His grip was like a steel vise. He hauled her up as if she weighed nothing. She scrambled onto the landing of the 4th floor, stumbling and fell right against him. His body was a wall of heat. He was drenched, and she was drenched, and for a second they just stood there, chest to chest, breathing hard. His arms were around her, holding her steady. She could feel the steady, powerful thud of his heart against her own. His smell, rain and expensive soap and something elemental and male, filled her head. His eyes, dark and intense, dropped to her mouth. The air in the hallway crackled, thick with something she could not name. Sparks flew. She felt the pull, a magnetic, dangerous thing. And it terrified her. She shoved herself away from him, staggering back. "Thank you," she mumbled, her voice hoarse. My grandmother—" She turned and fled up the stairs, not looking back. That night, she dreamed. It was confused and vivid. She dreamed of the elevator, of falling. But instead of hitting the ground, she was caught. She dreamed of Luca. He was shirtless, as she had imagined him on his balcony. He was standing in the rain, and he was holding back a shadowy figure that looked like Ray. He was violent and dangerous, but his eyes, when they looked at her, were protective. He turned and offered her his hand. She woke with a gasp, her body tangled in her sheets, her heart pounding. She was confused and angry at herself, and most terrifying of all, she was undeniably aroused. Across the street, Luca was not sleeping. He was toweling his hair dry when his burner phone, the one he kept for emergencies, vibrated on the marble countertop. It was not a text. "It was a call," he answered. "Yeah." The voice on the other end was strained, panicked. "They found the safe house in Miami. It was a setup. Someone talked. They know you're not in Europe." Luca's face hardened, the last of the warmth from the elevator vanishing. "Do they know where I am?" "Not yet. But they're looking. The old man is furious. You need to move. Now." Luca looked out the window, through the rain. At the dark square of her apartment, he should leave. He should pack his bag, walk out of the hotel, and be in a different state by sunrise. It was the smart move, the only move. "I can't leave," he said, his voice low. "What do you mean, you can't leave? This is your life, Luca." "I know," Luca said, his gaze fixed on her window. "I'm not leaving her unprotected." He hung up the phone, the world shrinking to a single, impossible choice. He was a man with a death sentence, and he had just found the one thing he was not willing to leave behind. Luca did not just disappear after the elevator. He became a fixture. He arrived at the Seaside Cafe every morning at 10, as regular as the tide. He took the same booth, his back to the wall, where he could see the entire room, the counter, and the door. He ordered a black coffee and a glass of water, and he would sit for 2, sometimes 3 hours. He became a strange, silent patron saint to the waitstaff. He charmed Sophia by complimenting her on a new, garish set of pink fingernails. He won over the cooks by sending his compliments back on a steak he had ordered, calling it the best in the city. And he tipped. He tipped in a way that changed the air in the room. He would leave a $100 bill for a $4 coffee every single day. He's like a movie star. Sophia whispered to Nina, her eyes wide as she folded the crisp bill into her apron. "He's just a tourist with too much money," Nina replied, her voice tight, but she knew it was a lie. His generosity was a performance, a way of buying the territory, and it was all directed at her. He charmed everyone, but he only watched her. His dark, intense gaze followed her as she moved between tables, as she argued with the distributor about a late delivery of lemons, as she counted the register. It was not a lecherous stare. It was something heavier, more complex. It was a look of assessment, of possession. It made her skin prickle and her hands unsteady. She tried to ignore him. She gave his orders to Sophia, but he would wait, patiently, until Nina was forced to walk by, and then he would stop her. "Nina, I need more water." His voice, low and gravelly, always seemed to find a nerve. She would refill his glass, her movements stiff, refusing to meet his eyes. He did not seem to mind. He just watched. The pressure on her was mounting. The dam was cracking. Her abuela's cough was worse. The collectors were calling about the hospital bills. Their practiced, polite voices a special kind of cruelty. And then there was Mateo. She was on the phone in the back hallway, by the employee lockers, twisting the silver cord around her fingers. "What do you mean? He's not been at practice," she whispered, frantic. "Where is he?" The coach on the other end was apologetic. "He's a good kid, Nina, but he's missed 3 days. The Vipers, well, you know how they are. They're telling him he's one of them now." She hung up the phone, her stomach a cold knot of dread. The Vipers, a local street gang run by men in their 20s who preyed on boys like Mateo, boys with no fathers and too many problems. They wanted him to run packages, to pay off the family debts, the same predatory loan taken out by her grandmother years ago that hung over their family like a curse. She leaned her head against the cool metal of the lockers, closing her eyes. Just for a second, T. "You're okay?" His voice. She snapped upright. Luca was standing at the end of the hall, holding his empty water glass. He must have followed her. "I'm fine," she said, her voice sharp, defensive. "No, you're not." He walked toward her, not threateningly, just closing the distance. He stopped a few feet away. "You look like you're carrying the whole world, Nina." She stared at him, at his expensive-looking watch, his perfect shirt. What would he know about her world? "You don't know anything about my world," she snapped. "Then tell me." It was not a challenge. It was a simple, quiet command, and for some reason, the dam broke. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the fear for Mateo. Or maybe it was just the fact that he was the first person in years who had looked at her like she was something other than a waitress, or a target, or a disappointment. "My brother," she said, the words spilling out, flat and dead. "He's 16. He's a good kid. But there's this gang, the Vipers. They're trying to recruit him, to make him pay off debts, my grandmother's debts. He's all I have." She did not cry. She was too tired to cry. She just stated the facts of her impossible life. Luca watched her, his expression unreadable. He said nothing for a long moment, then he just nodded. Once, a short, sharp gesture. He took the water pitcher from her numb hands. "Go home when your shift ends. Nina," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Get some sleep." He walked away, leaving her in the hallway, confused and trembling. 2 days later, the phone rang. It was the hospital. Nina's hand tightened, bracing for another demand. "Miss Rivera?" the woman from billing asked. Her voice was different, cheerful. "We just wanted to let you know that a significant payment has been made on your grandmother's account." Nina's blood went cold. "What? By who?" "It was an anonymous donation, ma'am, from the San Villano Community Fund. It's cleared your most urgent outstanding balance. You're in good standing for the next 90 days. Nina hung up the phone, stunned. The San Villano Community Fund? She had lived here her entire life and had never heard of it. It was a miracle, a several $1,000 miracle, and she did not believe in miracles. She walked out of the office, her eyes finding Luca in his booth. He was reading a newspaper, or pretending to. He looked up, his gaze meeting hers. He did not smile. He just held her gaze, and in that moment, she knew. She felt a wave of dizziness. She did not know whether to feel gratitude or terror. Ray, fueled by a mixture of cheap whiskey and wounded pride, did not have the sense to stay away. He had conveniently forgotten the warning in the alley, his tiny brain fixated on the public humiliation. He stormed into the cafe during the Tuesday lunch rush. The room was packed. He saw her. She was at Luca's table, taking his empty coffee cup. "So this is him?" Ray's voice. A gravelly shout silenced the entire room. Nina froze, her hand in midair. "This is the rich bastard you're screwing now?" Ray sneered, his face a mottled red. He lurched toward the table. "You think he makes you better than me?" "Ray, get out," Nina said, her voice low and shaking. "Embarrassing me," he roared. He was past reason. He lunged for her, grabbing her wrist, twisting it hard. "You're mine, Nina, you hear me?" Pain shot up her arm. She cried out before she could even blink. Luca was out of the booth. He did not rush. He moved with a terrifying, liquid grace. His hand closed around Ray's wrist. He applied pressure, just a little. There was a single, sickening, audible crack. Ray screamed, a high-pitched sound of pure agony. His grip on Nina vanished. Luca spun him around, slamming his face against the polished wood of the counter. Holding him there with one hand, the cafe was dead silent. Save for Ray's gasping sobs. "I believe," Luca said, his voice perfectly level, a cold, deadly whisper that carried to every corner of the room. "You owe the lady an apology." I'm sorry," Ray blubbered, his face mashed against the counter. "I don't think she heard you," Luca said, his voice hardening. "Publicly." "I'm sorry, Nina," Ray shrieked. The words a desperate plea. Luca held him for one more beat, then shoved him violently toward the door. "If you ever come within 500 feet of her again," Luca said, his voice dropping back to that lethal calm, "I will break more than your wrist." Ray scrambled out, clutching his arm, his sobs echoing down the street. The cafe was frozen. Sophia was holding a coffee pot, her mouth open. A tourist in the corner had his phone out, filming. Luca turned, his eyes finding the man. The man slowly lowered his phone. Nina was shaking, her wrist throbbing. Humiliation and fear and a strange, dark thrill warring inside her. She turned and fled to the back storage room, the only place she could hide. The adrenaline faded, leaving her weak-kneed. She slid down against a stack of 20-pound flour sacks, buried her face in her hands, and finally, let out the sobs she had been holding back for days. The door opened. It was Luca. He said nothing. He just sat down on a stack of beer crates across from her, his suit jacket immaculate, his presence filling the small, dark room. He waited. He let her cry, her ragged, hitching sobs the only sound. After a minute, he moved, kneeling in front of her. He was close, too close. He gently, so gently, took her hand, his thumb, warm and slightly rough, brushed over the red, angry mark on her wrist. "Did he hurt you?" he asked. His voice was rough, thick with an emotion she could not place. She shook her head, unable to speak, fresh tears welling up. He cupped her face, his hands large and warm, his thumbs wiping away the tears. "He won't ever again," he whispered. It was not a comfort, it was a vow. He leaned in, his eyes dark, searching hers, asking a question she was too broken to answer, so she did not pull away. He kissed her. It was not a violent kiss, but it was not soft. It was slow and deep and full of a pent-up, controlled hunger that shocked her to her core. It was a kiss that claimed, that branded. It was the first time in years she had felt anything from a man's touch other than fear or revulsion. She felt wanted. Her hands, on their own accord, found his shirt. Gripping the fine cotton, she kissed him back, a desperate, answering hunger that had been buried for a lifetime. Then the fear returned, not of him, of this, of what he was, what he could do, of what he made her feel. She pushed against his chest, her hands flat. "I can't," she whispered, her voice broken. He let her go, instantly. He did not try to hold her. He just knelt there, his face a mask of controlled passion, his breathing as ragged as hers. "I can't," she repeated, more for herself, and scrambled to her feet, fleeing past him and out the back door. Luca's problem-solving mode was fully engaged. He had dealt with Ray, the symptom, but he knew there was more. He had seen the way Nina jumped every time a police car passed, so he watched. He was a professional. He saw a patrol car that frequented her street, that seemed to slow down every time it passed her building. He got the car number, Officer Derek Shaw. Luca followed him for 2 days. He saw Shaw stop Mateo after basketball practice, pushing the kid against a fence, his hand on his holster. He saw Shaw park his cruiser at the end of Nina's block for an hour after dark, just watching. He saw Shaw meeting with a known loan shark, a man Luca recognized as one of the Viper's bosses, in a diner. They exchanged an envelope. That was all he needed. That night, Officer Derek Shaw finished his shift, whistling, and walked to his cruiser. He stopped. All 4 tires were slashed, flat to the rims. Tucked under the windshield wiper, stark white against the glass, was a single playing card, the King of Spades. Shaw's blood ran cold. There was no note. There did not need to be. It was a message from a world he only pretended to be on the right side of. He looked around, his hand on his gun, but the street was empty. Sophia, oblivious to the dark undercurrents swirling around her, was buzzing with excitement. It's the summer solstice. "Nina, everyone's going to the beach party at the Cove. You have to come. You never come to anything." Nina's first, second, and third instinct was to say no, but after the incident with Ray, the disappearance of her hospital debt, and the strange, terrifying kiss in the storage room, she felt unmoored. A tiny, rebellious spark, one she had not felt in years, had ignited. "Okay," she said, surprising herself. "Just for an hour." She went in her old jean shorts and a faded gray t-shirt. The beach was a chaotic, beautiful mess. A huge bonfire sent sparks up to the stars. String lights were strung between palm trees. A local band was playing a terrible, enthusiastic cover of a pop song. Nina was holding a warm plastic cup of beer she did not want, feeling out of place. When the music seemed to fade, he was walking across the sand. Luca. He was not in his linen trousers or his sharp suit. He was wearing a pair of faded blue jeans that hung perfectly on his lean hips, and a simple black t-shirt that stretched across his chest and broad shoulders. He was barefoot. He looked devastating. He was, by a wide margin, the sexiest man she had ever seen in her life. Every woman on the beach and most of the men stopped to stare. His eyes found her instantly. A magnetic pull. He did not look at anyone else. He walked straight to her. "Hi," he said, his voice a low rumble under the music. "Hi," she breathed, her heart doing a painful, lurching flip. He did not ask her to dance. He did not say anything else. He just held out his hand. She put her cup down. She took it. He led her to the edge of the crowd, under the swaying string lights, where the sand was damp and the ocean was a dark, whispering presence. He pulled her close, not too close. One hand settled on her waist, a light, scorching brand. The other held her hand. They moved slowly, barely dancing, just swaying to the rhythm of the waves. The chemistry was a physical thing, a thick, hot current flowing between them. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the clean, masculine scent of his skin. She had to know. She tipped her head back, forcing herself to meet his gaze. His eyes were dark, unreadable in the low light. "Why are you really here, Luca?" she asked, her voice quiet. "In San Villano." His thumb brushed the back of her hand, sending shivers up her arm. He was quiet for a long moment, the music and the party fading to a dull roar. "To see if someone like you," he said, his voice so low she had to strain to hear it, "would ever choose someone like me." Her breath caught. The party faded away. They walked, away from the fire, down the shoreline. The moon was a silver sliver, casting just enough light to see the white foam of the waves. They walked in silence, a silence that was more intimate than any conversation. He stopped, turning to face her. The sound of the ocean was a roar. He gently, so gently, touched her bare shoulder, his fingers tracing her collarbone. The simple touch was an explosion. It sent a jolt of pure, liquid heat through her entire body. Her mind was screaming at her to run, to get away from this man who was dangerous in ways she could not even comprehend. But her body leaned in. She rose on her toes and kissed him. This kiss was hers. It was not a kiss of fear or desperation. It was a kiss of choice. It was deep and searching and hungry. He responded instantly, his arms wrapped around her, pulling her flush against his hard body, one hand tangling in her hair, tilting her head back. His mouth was firm, skilled, possessive. He kissed her like he was starving, and she was the only thing that could save him. He had a blanket from his car. She'd not even seen him grab it. He laid it down on the dry sand, near the dunes, sheltered from the wind. He pulled her down, laying her on the soft wool. He followed, propping himself up on one elbow, his body a dark, powerful shadow above her. He just looked at her, his eyes tracing her face in the moonlight. "You're beautiful," he whispered, the words almost stolen by the wind. He kissed her again, slowly this time, a long, languid exploration. His hand moved from her waist, up her side, his thumb brushing the sensitive swell of her breast through her t-shirt. She gasped into his mouth, his hand explored, finding the hem of her shirt, sliding underneath to touch the bare, heated skin of her stomach. Her breath hitched. Her hands were in his thick, soft hair, pulling him closer. His mouth moved from hers, down her jaw, to the wildly beating pulse in her neck. The passion built, a hot, coiling thing in her belly, a pressure that was almost painful. She wanted, for the first time, she truly, desperately wanted. It was too fast, it was too much, but she did not want to stop. He was the one who did. He pulled back, his breathing ragged, his forehead resting against hers. His eyes were closed, his jaw tight with a control that must have been costing him everything. "I'll wait," he whispered, his voice thick, almost pained. "I'll wait until you want it too badly to say no." He kissed her one last time, a hard, promising press of his lips. Then he stood, pulling her up with him. He was a gentleman. A violent, dangerous gentleman who broke bones and paid hospital bills and kissed like he was drowning. And Nina Rivera, for the first time in her life, was in more trouble than she could ever have imagined. After that night on the beach, the unspoken truce was broken. The lines, which Nina had so carefully drawn around her life, were washed away by a tide she could not control. Luca was no longer just a shadow in a coffee shop booth. He was a presence. He did not ask for her time. He simply claimed it. He was there when her shift ended, leaning against his unassuming but obviously expensive rental car, the late afternoon sun catching the sharp line of his jaw. The first time, she had stopped, her apron clutched in her hand. "I can walk," she had said, her voice weak. "I know," he'd replied, opening the passenger door, "but you're not going to." So he drove her home, and the next night, he was there again. Soon. It was a ritual. He would wait, a silent guardian, and walk her the last few steps from his car to the peeling front door of her building. He never tried to come in. He never pushed, but his presence was a shield. The junkies on the corner looked away. The catcalls from the construction site across the street had evaporated. Nina found herself breathing, really breathing for the first time in years. The knot of fear that had lived in her stomach for as long as she could remember had loosened. Just a fraction. This, she realized with a terrifying jolt, was what it felt like to be safe. It was intoxicating, and it was all tied to a man she knew, on a visceral level, was more dangerous than all the junkies and catcallers combined. The illusion of safety shattered on a Thursday. She was in the middle of the lunch rush, her arms loaded with plates. When her phone buzzed in her apron pocket, it buzzed again and again, impatient, frantic. She set the plates down, her hands suddenly clammy. It was Mateo's school. "Nina, you need to come," the school nurse said, her voice tight with a forced, professional calm. "Mateo's been in a fight. The paramedics are on their way." The world went silent. The clatter of plates, the orders being shouted, the hiss of the espresso machine, it all faded to a dull, distant roar. "Where is he?" she managed to say, her voice a thin, reedy sound. "St. Jude's. They're taking him to St. Jude's." She dropped her apron on the counter. She did not clock out. She did not say a word to her manager. She just ran, her feet pounding the pavement, shoving past tourists who stared at her wild-eyed panic. It was 2 miles to the hospital. She ran. She burst through the emergency room doors, her lungs burning, her hair ripped from its bun. "My brother," she gasped at the intake nurse. "Mateo Rivera. He was in a fight. He's being processed. Honey," the nurse said, not looking up. "You'll have to wait. No, you don't understand. Away, Nina." His voice. She spun around. Luca was standing by the vending machines, his back rigid, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists at his sides. He was not the calm, collected man from the cafe. He was terrifying. His face was a mask of cold, controlled fury, his dark eyes burning with a murderous light. He had gotten there before her. "Where is he?" she whispered, walking toward him. "They're taking him for x-rays. His arm is broken, his face." Luca's voice was a low growl, vibrating with a violence that made the air around him feel thin. A doctor appeared. "Family of Mateo Rivera?" Nina surged forward. "I'm his sister. He's going to be okay," the doctor said, a kind, tired smile on his face. "He has a spiral fracture in his left ulna, 3 cracked ribs, and he'll need about 12 stitches over his right eye. But he's conscious, and he's lucky. Whoever did this, they didn't hold back." "Who did this?" Nina asked, turning to Luca, her body shaking with a new, cold anger. Luca's gaze was stone. "Who do you think?" "Ray." Of course. It was Ray. Ray, who had been warned. Ray, who had been humiliated. Ray, who had seen Mateo as the perfect, easy target to reclaim his pathetic pride. "I will kill him," Luca said. It was not a threat. It was a simple, factual statement. He said it with the same casual certainty as a man ordering coffee. "I will find him, and I will tear him apart with my bare hands." He started to move, heading for the exit. A man on a mission. "No!" Nina's voice was a shriek. She ran after him, grabbing his arm. It was like grabbing a block of granite. "No, Luca, please." He looked down at her hand on his arm, then up at her face, his eyes still blazing. "He put his hands on your brother. He put your brother in a hospital. That is not something I allow." "And what happens then?" she cried, tears of rage and fear streaming down her face. "You kill him and you go to jail, or his family comes after you, or more violence. I am sick of violence. I have lived my entire life surrounded by it. I don't want it. I don't want it for Mateo, and I don't want it for you." His expression flickered, the inferno in his eyes banked, just a little, replaced by a cold, hard confusion. He had never had a woman plead for the life of his enemy before. "He needs to be punished, Nina." "Then punish him," she pleaded, her voice dropping, her grip tightening on his arm. "Do what you did at the cafe. Scare him, hurt him, I don't care. But don't kill him. Don't make this. What we have, don't stain it with that. Please." He stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. The muscle in his jaw worked, a tick of pure, restrained fury. He finally, slowly, covered her hand with his own. "For you," he said, his voice a gravelly whisper. "I will not kill him for now." He gently removed her hand from his arm and walked out of the hospital. Luca found Ray 2 days later, hiding out in a cheap motel 10 miles up the coast. He did not break down the door. He picked the lock. Ray was passed out on the bed, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the nightstand. Luca moved with a chilling silence. He took the bottle and Ray's phone. He sat in the room's single, stained chair and waited. An hour later, Ray woke up, his head pounding. He groaned, rolling over, and his eyes met Luca's. Ray's scream was cut off as Luca crossed the room in 2 strides, his hand clamping over Ray's mouth. "We are going to be very, very quiet, Ray," Luca whispered, his other hand holding the whiskey bottle by the neck. "I gave you a choice. You chose poorly. You put your hands on a child." "A boy," He let the words hang in the stale, sour air. Ray was shaking, tears of pure terror filling his eyes. "Nina asked me not to kill you," Luca continued, his voice conversational, as if they were discussing the weather. "She is a kinder person than I am. So, I will honor her wish, but you will not be staying." He pulled a thick envelope from his jacket pocket and threw it on the bed. "In there is $5,000, enough for a bus ticket and a fresh start somewhere far away from here, somewhere like Alaska." He then pulled out a second envelope, this one thinner. He tossed it onto Ray's chest. It was full of photographs. Ray, half naked, with another man's wife. Ray, taking a payoff to throw his last professional fight. "This is my insurance," Luca said. "If you are ever in the state of California again, I will not send these to your bookie or to that woman's husband. I will send them to my associates. They will be very, very disappointed in you, and they are not as kind as I am." He leaned in, his face inches from Ray's, his hand still clamped over his mouth. "But if you ever think the name Nina or Matteo again, I will not send pictures. I will come back, and I will break more than your arm. I will break your ribs. I will break your legs. I will break every bone in your body until you are a bag of jelly in a skin suit, and you will beg me to die. Do you understand?" Ray nodded, a frantic, spastic movement. "Good." Luca stood up. He walked to the door, then paused. He looked back at the pathetic, trembling man on the bed. "Oh," he said, a cold, thin smile playing on his lips, "and as a parting gift." He calmly, with a flick of his wrist, shattered the whiskey bottle against the cheap wooden dresser. Then he turned and left, locking the door from the outside. Nina's suspicion was a living thing, a seed of doubt that had been watered by the hospital payment, by Ray's attack, and by Luca's terrifying promise. He was not a tourist. Tourists did not have that kind of cold, lethal anger. Tourists did not make men like Ray disappear, because Ray was gone. He was not at his bar. He was not at his motel. He had, as Luca had promised, vanished. She was on edge, and so, it seemed, was he... He still drove her home, but he was different. He was quieter, his eyes constantly scanning, his hand never far from the inside of his jacket. He was a man anticipating a fight. One night, he was driving her home from her late shift, the car silent except for the soft rock on the radio. "My abuela's feeling better," she said, just to fill the silence. "The new medication seems to be helping." "That's good, Nina," he said, his eyes checking the rearview mirror for the third time in a minute. She needed a napkin. She had spilled a drop of coffee on her hand. She reached for the glove box. "Don't," he said, his voice sharp, almost a bark. She froze, her hand on the latch. "Why? I just need a..." She opened it. Inside, next to the car's manual and a pair of his sunglasses, was a gun. It was not a small, concealable weapon. It was a large, black, serious piece of machinery, cold, heavy, and absolutely real. She stared at it. The music on the radio faded. The sound of her own heartbeat was a drum in her ears. She said nothing. She did not scream. She just looked at the gun, and then she looked at him. He had pulled the car over, slamming it into park at the curb. 2 blocks from her apartment, his face was a mask, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the hard set of his jaw. "Nina," he began. "Who are you?" she asked. Her voice did not shake. It was as cold and hard as the steel in his glove box. "Don't lie to me. Luca, not anymore. Who are you?" He turned to her, his dark eyes filled with 1,000 things she could not read, regret, anger, and a deep, profound weariness. "I'm not a tourist," he said. "I know," she shot back. "Tourists don't carry guns like that. They don't break men's wrists. They don't make hospital bills disappear. Who are you?" He looked away, out the windshield, at the dark, empty street. "I'm a man who has done bad things. Nina, things you don't want to know about." "And did Ray deserve what you did to him?" His head snapped back, his gaze locking with hers. "Yes, he did. I have done bad things, but never ever to people who don't deserve it. Never to an innocent, never to someone like you." The fear was a cold, coiling thing in her stomach. She should run. She should get out of this car, out of this man's life, and never look back. He was everything she had ever been afraid of. Dark, dangerous, violent, but he was also the man who had sat with her in the storage room, the man who had protected her brother, the man who had made her feel safe. She could not deny her feelings. The fear was real, but the pull, the magnetic, undeniable want, was stronger. "Take me home, Luca," she whispered. He did. He walked her to her door, the gun a silent, heavy presence between them. At her door, she fumbled for her keys. He took them from her trembling hand and unlocked the door. Pushing it open, she walked in, but he did not follow. He stood in the doorway, a dark silhouette against the dingy hallway light. "Go to sleep, Nina," he said, his voice rough. She turned to face him. He was a man on the edge, a man holding himself back by a thread, and she knew, with a sudden, sharp clarity, that she was the one who had to make the choice. She stepped toward him. "I am so scared of you," she whispered, her hand coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart, a heavy, frantic beat beneath her palm. "You should be," he said, his voice thick. "But I'm not," she said, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. "Not really." She rose on her toes and kissed him. It was a kiss of surrender, a kiss that said, "I know, and I don't care." A guttural sound, halfway between a groan and a growl, ripped from his chest. His control shattered. His arms went around her, lifting her off her feet, kicking the door shut with his heel. He kissed her back, a raw, desperate, hungry kiss that tasted of fear and anger and a deep, bone-weary loneliness. He carried her to the bedroom, never breaking the kiss. The room was dark, lit only by the streetlights from the window. He laid her on the bed, his body a heavy, warm weight covering hers. This was not the gentle, controlled man from the beach. This was the man who had a gun in his car, the man who had promised to kill. But his hands, as they moved over her, were not violent. They were urgent, possessive, but they were also shaking. He pulled back, his face inches from hers. "Nina, if you want me to stop, you have to say it now, because in one more second, I don't think I can." She looked up at him, at this dangerous, broken, beautiful man. "Don't stop," she whispered. Their lovemaking was not a gentle exploration. It was a collision. It was slow and intense and emotionally overwhelming. It was the desperate, frantic clawing of two people who had been starved their entire lives. Her for safety, him for something pure. His hands were everywhere, in her hair, on her skin, tracing lines of fire. Her hands gripped his shoulders, her nails biting into his skin, pulling him closer, wanting all of him. It was everything. It was rage and release, fear and safety, all tangled together. When it was over, she lay beneath him, her body trembling, her lungs aching, and she began to sob. Not the quiet, shaking sobs of her kitchen, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place she had kept locked away. He went still, instantly, his passion replaced by panic. "Nina, did I hurt you? No," she cried, clinging to him. "No, it's just, I'm not scared." It was the truth. She was lying in the arms of a man who was probably a killer, and for the first time in her entire life, she felt completely, utterly safe. He held her, his big body shielding hers, letting her cry. He stroked her hair, his rough hands a strange comfort. When her sobs finally quieted, he shifted, kissing the salty, tear-stained skin of her shoulder. He raised his head, a small, dark smile playing on his lips. "You shouldn't tease a man like me," he whispered, his voice rough. She let out a watery, exhausted laugh, and for the first time in days, she smiled. The next morning, Nina visited her grandmother. Matteo was there, his arm in a bright blue cast, his face a map of purple and yellow bruises, but his eyes were clear. He was safe. Nina sat by her abuela's bed, holding her thin, papery hand. "You are different, mija," her grandmother said, her voice a reedy rasp, but her eyes sharp. "You are not carrying the world today." Nina looked down. "It's just a good day, abuela." "It is a man," she stated, not asked. "This man, the one who paid the bills." Nina's head snapped up. "How did you know?" "A mother knows. A grandmother knows everything." She squeezed Nina's hand. "Who is he? This man who makes you smile with your eyes?" Nina thought of the gun. She thought of the fury in the hospital. She thought of the way he held her while she cried. "He's someone," Nina said, the words coming out soft but sure, "who makes me feel like I matter. That is all that is important," her grandmother said, closing her eyes. "Be careful, Nina, but be happy." Across town, at the Seaside Cafe, the lunch rush was in full swing. A new cook, a gaunt man with nervous, shifty eyes, was working the grill. He was sweating, and not just from the heat. During a lull, he slipped out the back door, into the alley, his phone pressed to his ear. "Yeah, he's here," the cook whispered, looking around. "He's still here. That's what I'm telling you." He listened for a moment. Yeah, I'll do it. How much?" Okay, I'll do it." He hung up, his hands shaking. He looked at the back door, the one that was supposed to be locked. He slipped a small piece of wood into the jamb, just enough to keep the latch from catching. Then he went back to the grill, the bribe money already a burning hole in his pocket. Luca's enemies had found him. The night air was thick and humid when Nina pushed open the back door of the cafe. The smell of the alley, stale beer, rotting produce, and the ocean clinging to her. It was past 10 o'clock. She'd stayed late again, scrubbing the grout in the kitchen, her mind a million miles away, replaying the feel of Luca's skin, the weight of his gun. She was so lost in the confusion of it all that she did not see the two men step out from the shadows of the dumpster. She did not hear them until one of them was right behind her. A hand, reeking of gasoline and sweat, clamped over her mouth. A thick arm wrapped around her waist, lifting her off her feet. She did not freeze. Her life had taught her to fight. She screamed into the man's palm, a muffled, useless sound. She drove her elbow back, hard, connecting with something soft. The man grunted, his grip loosening just enough. She stomped down, her heel connecting with his instep. He roared, but the second man was on her, grabbing her arms, trying to pin her. "Get her in the van," a voice barked. She saw it then, a black van, idling silently at the end of the alley. Its side door slid open. This was not a robbery. This was an abduction. Pure, undiluted terror gave her a surge of strength. She bit down on the hand covering her mouth, tasting the metallic tang of blood. The man howled, shoving her away. She stumbled, falling against a stack of crates, and that is when she screamed, a raw, piercing shriek that tore out of her throat, echoing off the brick walls. She was scrambling to her feet when she heard the sound of a car door slamming, followed by footsteps, not running, pounding. Luca. He came out of the darkness at the end of the alley, not as a suitor, but as a predator. His face was a mask of pure, lethal rage. The two men paused, surprised by his sudden appearance. "Let her go," Luca said. His voice was not loud. It was a low, guttural command. The first man, the one she had bitten, laughed. He pulled a knife. "Or what? Get lost. Man, this ain't your business." "She is," Luca said. "All of my business." He moved. The man with the knife lunged. Luca sidestepped, his arm a blur. There was a sound of a joint popping, and the man screamed, his arm bending at an unnatural angle. The knife clattered on the pavement. The second man, seeing his partner go down, turned to run for the van. He did not make it 2 steps. Luca had the gun in his hand. Nina had not even seen him draw it. The sound was not what she expected. It was not the muted pop from the movies. It was a deafening, final crack that echoed in the narrow alley, a sound so loud it vibrated in her bones. The man in front of Luca just dropped. He did not cry out. He did not fall gracefully. He collapsed, a puppet with its strings cut, his head hitting the pavement with a sickening, wet thud. Silence. The ringing in Nina's ears was deafening. The air smelled of sulfur and copper. The other man, the one with the broken arm, was scrambling backward, whimpering. Luca walked over to him, kicked the knife away, and pointed the gun at his head. "Who sent you?" Luca's voice was devoid of all emotion. I don't know," the man sobbed. "A name, Marco, he just paid us. He said to grab the girl. Luca stared at him for 1, 2, 3 seconds. Then he lowered the gun. He turned to Nina, who was still frozen against the crates, her hands over her mouth, her eyes wide with a horror that was just beginning to set in. "Nina," he said, his voice still flat, "we have to go. Now." He grabbed her arm. She did not resist. She was in shock. He pulled her past the body, past the whimpering man, and into his car. He did not take her to her apartment. He did not take her to his hotel. He drove for 20 minutes, his hands steady on the wheel, his jaw set, his eyes constantly checking the mirrors. He had one hand on the wheel, the other held the gun, now resting in his lap. Nina just stared at the blood. It was on his shirt, a dark, glistening spray across his right side. Not his blood, the attacker's. He pulled into an underground garage, into a private slot, and took her up a service elevator. The safe house was an expensive, minimalist apartment on the 30th floor, all glass and steel, with a view of an ocean she could not see. It was sterile, cold, and utterly anonymous. He closed the door, the heavy thud of the deadbolt echoing in the silent room. Nina finally found her voice. She backed away from him, her body shaking so hard her teeth chattered. You killed him." "Yes." He did not look away. He set the gun on the granite countertop. "You shot him. He's dead. Yes, Nina." The shock finally broke, shattered by a wave of icy, furious clarity. "Who are you?" she screamed, the sound tearing from her. "You told me you did bad things. You didn't tell me you were a murderer, a killer." "I did what I had to do," he said, his voice low, advancing on her. "No," she shouted, putting her hands up. "Don't you come near me. You have blood on you." He stopped, looking down at his shirt as if noticing it for the first time. He looked tired. "Nina, tell me," she whispered, her rage collapsing into a desperate, hollow fear. "No more lies. I watched a man die for you. I deserve the truth." He looked at her, his dark eyes filled with a pain that matched her own, and he told her. He told her everything. His name was not just Luca, it was Luca Romano. He was the underboss of the Romano crime family, one of the most powerful and ruthless organizations on the East Coast. He was not a tourist. He was a target. "There was a disagreement," he said, his voice flat. "An assassination attempt. It failed, but I was wounded. I was sent here, to San Villano, to recover, to hide. It's the last place they would look." "Who?" she whispered. "My cousin. My uncle. My father," he said, the last word landing like a stone. "There is a bounty on my head. My own father wants me dead." The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. The man she had slept with, the man who had made her feel safe, was not just dangerous. He was hunted. "The men in the alley," she said, processing. "They were here for you. They said a name. Marco. My cousin." Luca breathed, his face going pale. "They weren't here for me. They were here for you. To get to me." The realization hit her like a physical blow. She had not just been in danger, she had been leverage. "You lied to me," she said, the words hollow. "Every day. The coffee, the money, the beach. It was all a lie." "No," he said, stepping toward her, his hands up, palms open. "I protected you. I took Ray out of your life. I paid your grandmother's bills. I kept you safe." "Safe?" she shrieked, a wild, hysterical laugh bubbling in her throat. "Safe. I just watched you put a bullet in a man's head. I was nearly thrown into a van. How is this safe, Luca? You didn't protect me. You painted a target on my back." She was right, and the knowledge of it, the shame, was a visible weight on his shoulders. "Nina, I never meant for this. For you. I was supposed to be a ghost. I need time," she said, backing toward the door. I can't be here." "You can't go home," he said, his voice urgent. "It's not safe. Marco knows where you live. He knows where you work." "So what?" she cried. "I'm your prisoner now? In this glass box." He walked to her, and this time she was too exhausted to move. He stopped, just inches from her. "I will never, ever lock you in, but I will never, ever let them hurt you." You need time? Fine. Take it, but you're not going home. He walked to her purse, which he had grabbed from the car. He opened it, and he put his gun, inside it. She stared at him, horrified. He's not the only one who can use it, he said, his voice soft. Just in case. I will get you a burner phone. I will take you to your grandmother's. It's the one place they won't look for you right away. But you cannot be alone. She was too numb to argue. She found Matteo at her grandmother's apartment, his face pale with worry. Nina, where were you? I called the cafe. They said you left. I'm fine, Maddie, she said, her voice sounding strange and thin to her own ears. What's wrong? He asked, and then he saw it. Her purse was open on the kitchen counter. The black, heavy steel of the gun was visible. Nina? Matteo's voice was a small, frightened squeak. What is that? She tried to cover it, but it was too late. He knew. It's for protection. Protection from what? His eyes, so like her own, filled with a sudden, dawning comprehension. It's him, isn't it, Luca? Matteo, it's complicated. Complicated, he shouted, his voice cracking. Ray disappeared. Nina just vanished. And then that guy's money pays for Abuela. And now you have a gun. This is him. This is what he does. He's protecting us. He's not protecting us, Nina. He's the reason we need protecting. He brought this. I saw the news. Some guy shot in an alley behind your work. That was him, wasn't it? She could not answer. Her silence was a confession. I knew it, Matteo whispered, his face crumpling. He looked at her, his sister, the only person who had ever been on his side, and all he saw was a stranger. You chose him. You chose this. You're just like everyone else. Matteo, that's not true. He's a monster. Nina, and you're sleeping with him. He shoved past her, yanked the door open, and ran. Matteo, she screamed, running after him. But he was gone. A flash of his red hoodie disappearing down the stairs. She was alone in the hallway, the gun a heavy, cold weight in her purse. She had one person left to call. They searched all night. The tension in the car was so thick, so heavy it was a physical thing. It was just the two of them, the hunter and the heartbroken, cruising the dark, empty streets of San Villano. Every time a car passed, Nina flinched. This is your fault, she said, her voice dead. As they passed the arcade for the third time. I know, he said, his eyes scanning the sidewalks. You brought this to us. You brought guns and death to my family. I know. He's just a boy. Luca, he's just a boy. And you've ruined him. Luca slammed on the brakes, pulling the car into a dark, trash-strewn alley. He cut the engine. The sudden silence was louder than her accusations. He turned to her, his face a mask of stone in the dim streetlight. Is that what you think? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet. That I am a monster? That I ruin everything I touch? Aren't you? She shot back, her fear and grief finally boiling over into pure, unadulterated rage. Look at me. Look at what you've done to my life. I was fine. I was tired and I was broke, but my brother was safe. And now. She could not finish. She was so angry. So frustrated, so terrified, she did the only thing she could think of. She slapped him, her hand connected with his cheek, the sound a sharp, ugly crack in the small space. He did not flinch, he did not even blink, he just stared at her, the red mark of her handprint blooming on his skin. And then she broke. The anger vanished, leaving a black, gaping hole of despair. She lunged at him, her hands fisting in his bloody shirt, and she kissed him. It was not a kiss. It was a war. It was violent and sloppy and full of teeth and tears. It was a desperate, primal scream without a sound. He kissed her back with the same savage, hungry desperation, his hands tangling in her hair, pulling her close. His mouth was hard, demanding, a brutal answer to her brutal frustration. This was not love. It was survival. It was two people, drowning in a world of violence, clinging to the only other solid thing in the dark. It was rough and emotional and hungry. He pushed her back against the passenger seat, his body covering hers, a shield against the world. It was a desperate, frantic collision, an attempt to erase the fear, to feel something, anything other than the cold terror that had gripped them both. It was over as quickly as it began, leaving them breathless and shaking in the dark, the smell of gunpowder and her tears clinging to the air. She was the one who spoke first, her voice a ragged whisper. The pier. He always goes to the pier when he's upset. They found him at the end of the long wooden pier, his legs dangling over the dark, swirling water. He looked small and young and terribly alone. Nina started to run toward him. "Matteo!" "Stay in the car," Luca said, his hand on her arm. "No, he's my—" "Please, Nina," he said, his eyes pleading. "Let me—" She stopped, her heart in her throat. Luca got out of the car and walked slowly down the pier. Matteo heard his footsteps and tensed. "Go away," Matteo said, not turning around. "I don't want to talk to you." Luca did not stop until he was standing right behind him. He did not loom. He did not threaten. He knelt. He knelt in the dirt and the salt spray, bringing himself down to Matteo's level. "You're right," Luca said, his voice rough. Matteo finally turned, his face a mess of confusion and tear-stained anger. "You're right," Luca said again, his gaze unwavering. "I brought this violence, this fear. It's my world, and I dragged you and your sister into it. That's on me." Matteo just stared at him. "I'm not going to tell you I'm a good man," Luca continued, his voice raw with a truth Nina had never heard. "I'm not, but I'm telling you this. You're not my blood. You're not my family. But I'd take a bullet for you. I'd take a dozen." He leaned in, and the moonlight caught the sincerity in his dark, pained eyes. "Because your sister," he said, his voice breaking, "just a fraction. Your sister is all I've got left worth protecting. She's the only good thing I've touched in my entire life, and I will burn the whole world down, starting with myself, before I let anyone hurt her." He stood up, his knees cracking in the silence. He did not wait for an answer. He just turned and walked back to the car. Matteo watched him go. He looked at this killer, this man who had just confessed to a world of sin. Then he looked at his sister, standing by the car, her face pale, her hands trembling. He looked down at the dark water, and then, slowly, he stood up and followed. Nina watched her brother walk toward her, his anger gone, replaced by a quiet, shaken acceptance. She watched Luca get into the driver's seat, his hands gripping the wheel, his shoulders heavy with the weight of his own words. She stood between them, in the cold, pre-dawn light, and she finally understood. Luca was not a hero. He was not a prince. He was a man made of shadows and violence. He was dangerous. He was broken. He was loyal, and he was hers. The fantasy of escape became their only comfort. In the sterile silence of the glass-walled safe house, they planned a new life. The words, a fragile, desperate prayer. They were fugitives, not lovers, but the line had blurred until it was invisible. "Mexico," Nina whispered one night, curled against his side on the minimalist sofa, the city lights of San Villano glittering like a trap below them. "A small town, on the coast. I could wait tables. You could. I don't know. You're good at fixing things." Luca, his body tense even in rest, ran a hand over her hair. He had not slept, truly slept, in days. "I was thinking Europe," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Greece, an island. No one would ever find us. You could open your own cafe. No more taking orders." She smiled against his chest, a small, sad smile. "My brother, though, my abuela. We take them," he said, the words fierce. "A vow. We take them all. We disappear." It was a beautiful, impossible dream, and they both knew it. They were in a cage, and the walls were closing in. The call came 3 days after the alley. It was not on the burner phone Luca had given her, but on her old one, which she had kept in her purse, a last link to a life that no longer existed. She was alone, Luca having gone to make arrangements, his face a grim, unreadable mask. Nina Rivera. The voice was male, crisp, and official. "Who is this?" "My name is Agent Harris. I'm with the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Nina's blood turned to ice water. She sank onto the sofa. I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do. Miss Rivera," the voice said, losing its professional edge, gaining a note of practiced sympathy. You're in a lot of trouble. The man you're with, Luca Romano, he's not a good person, he's a killer, and he's brought a war to your doorstep. I don't know anyone by that name. Stop, Harris said, his voice sharp. We know about the men in the alley. We know about your brother's attacker, Ray. We know about the hospital bills. We know everything. And we know that Luca's family is hunting him, which means they're hunting you. She was trembling, the phone slippery in her hand. Here's the offer. Nina, he said, his voice dropping, becoming intimate, persuasive. You're a victim. Your brother, your grandmother. We can get you out. Full witness protection, a new life, a real one. New names, a new home. All you have to do is help us. You tell us where he is. You let us take him. The betrayal was a cold, slick thing, offered to her on a platter. Run, escape, be safe. The words she had dreamed of. All she had to do was sell the soul of the one person who had looked at her like she mattered. Go to hell, she whispered. Miss Rivera, be smart. She hung up the phone. She threw it across the room, where it shattered against the concrete wall, the battery skittering across the floor. But the call had been a prelude, or perhaps a test she had just failed. She had to see her grandmother. The fear from the phone call, the claustrophobia of the safe house. It was too much. Luca was still gone. She took a cab, her hand in her purse, wrapped around the cold steel of his gun. The front door of her apartment was unlocked. It was open, just a crack. Abuela, she called out, her voice high, thin. She pushed it open. The apartment was not just ransacked, it was violated. It was an act of profound, personal hatred. The sofa cushions were slashed, stuffing pulled out like entrails. The few family photos she owned were smashed, the glass crunching under her feet. Mateo's trophies were shattered. Abuela! She ran to the small bedroom. Her grandmother was on the floor, tangled in her sheets. Her eyes were wide with a terror so deep Nina had never seen it before. She was alive, but her breathing was a shallow, frantic whistle. The breathing machine in the corner had been unplugged, its cord cut. I tried. Mija, the old woman wheezed, her hand reaching. They said, don't talk. Nina sobbed, fumbling with her phone, the burner, to call 911. They said to tell the girl her lover's price is high. Saint. Jude's was a recurring nightmare. The same antiseptic smell, the same pale green walls, the same gnawing, acid-filled dread. This time, it was worse. Her grandmother was in the intensive care unit, separated from her by a wall of glass and a web of tubes. The shock, the terror, had triggered a severe respiratory event. The doctor had said she was critical. Luca found her there, in the hallway, staring through the glass. He had not needed to be called. He had returned to the safe house, found her gone, and known, with a sick certainty, exactly where the next blow would land. He stood beside her, his suit immaculate, his face carved from ice. He did not look at Nina. He just stared at the frail old woman in the bed, the machines breathing for her. This, he said, his voice a dead, hollow thing, is my fault. He was the monster. He was the plague. Everything he touched, he destroyed. Mateo had been right. Luca, she started, but she had no words. He turned and walked away. He stopped at the end of the hall, pulling his own burner phone. His back was to her, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand gripped the phone until his knuckles were white. His voice was a lethal whisper. You told me it was a hit. You told me it was a simple cleanup. He listened. Marco. I know it was Marco, but this was not his style. This was ugly. This was personal. He was silent, listening, his entire body rigid. What? He breathed. A test? A test? He slammed his free hand against the wall, a single violent crack that made a nurse jump. He sent Marco, my father. He sent him to test my loyalty? To see if I'd sacrifice her? He laughed, a horrifying, humorless sound. He wants to see what's left of me? He wants to know if I'm still a Romano? He hung up the phone, not bothering to say goodbye. He turned to face her, his eyes black holes of a pain so deep she could not comprehend it. "This wasn't just a hunt. Nina," he said, his voice raw, "this was a game. My father's game. He wanted to see if I would let them hurt you. To prove I was still one of them. To prove I was still his son." The cruelty of it was beyond anything she could imagine. A father, testing his son, using her family, as the bait. "I have to end this," he said. He walked toward her, his face a mask of terrible resolve. He cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin, a gesture of agonizing tenderness. "Stay with her. Lock the doors. Do not leave this hospital. I will be back." "Luca, where are you going?" she whispered, terrified. "I'm going to see my cousin," he said, "and I am going to show my father what I have become." The warehouse was on the industrial side of the docks, a vast corrugated steel shell that smelled of rust and dead fish. Luca did not go in with guns blazing. He went in through a high window, a shadow in the moonlight, silent as death. He found Marco on the catwalk, smoking a cigarette, looking down on a handful of men playing cards. "You're sloppy, Marco," Luca said from the darkness. The card game stopped. Marco spun, his hand flying to his gun. "Luca, you came to congratulate me? Father is very impressed. Your little waitress. She's got fire." "She's not a part of this," Luca said, stepping into the dim light, her hands empty, at his sides. "Oh, but she is," Marco laughed, a high, thin sound. "She's the whole part. Father wanted to see if you had gone soft, if this puta had turned you into a civilian. He gave me a simple order. Take away the toy. See if he cries. And what if I do? Then you're weak." Marco sneered. "And you're not his son, and you're not my underboss. You're just a man waiting to die." "You came into her home," Luca said, his voice dropping, the temperature in the warehouse seeming to fall with it. "You put your hands on her grandmother, and I'll put my hands on her next," Marco taunted. "After I kill you, I'm going to find her, and I'm going to—" He never finished the sentence. Luca's gun was in his hand. The first shot took Marco in the shoulder, spinning him around. The men below opened fire, the warehouse exploding into a deafening chaos of ricochets and shouts. Luca was not a man. He was a force. He moved through the shadows, firing with a cold, devastating precision. He was a trained killer, and they were thugs, one by one. They fell. He took a bullet, a hot, searing graze along his ribs, but he did not slow down. He stalked the catwalk, moving toward the office where Marco had fled. He kicked the door in. The office was empty. A window, overlooking the water, was shattered. "This isn't over, cousin," Marco's voice echoed from the darkness outside, from a boat speeding away. "Father will see. He will see that you chose her. He'll see you're weak." Luca did not shoot. He just stood, his chest heaving, the blood from his side dripping onto the floor. He returned to the safe house. He had to. He could not go back to the hospital covered in blood and gunpowder. Nina was there. She had left the hospital, her terror of being alone greater than her terror of waiting for him. She saw him, his shirt soaked on one side, his face pale and strained. "You're hurt," she breathed, rushing to him. "It's nothing," he said, brushing past her, grabbing a bottle of whiskey from the bar. "I saw him," he said, pouring a glass, his hand shaking. "He's gone. It's over," she asked, her voice full of a fragile, desperate hope. "No," he said, downing the whiskey in one gulp. "It's just the beginning." He turned to her, his face a mask of cold, hard decision. "This ends. Now, I am getting you, Matteo, and your grandmother out of this state. I have a plane. I have people. I will put you somewhere safe, somewhere my father can never find you." "Good," she said, relief flooding her. "We'll go. Where are we?" "You," he said, cutting her off, "are going. I am not." The relief vanished. "What? What are you talking about? You're coming with us." "No," he said, his voice flat. "Look at me. Nina, look at your grandmother. She is in the ICU because of me. Matteo is terrified because of me. You were almost abducted because of me. Marco is right. My father is right. I am a plague, and I am done infecting you." "So what?" she cried, her voice rising. "You're just going to push me away. You're just going to send us off, and you're going to stay here and get yourself killed. She is safer without me, he said, his voice breaking. You're all safer without me. No, she shouted, and she hit him, her fist pounding on his good shoulder. No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to make that choice for me. He grabbed her wrists, holding her. Nina, stop. I won't. She sobbed, tears of pure rage streaming down her face. You think this is safety? You think I want to be safe without you? I was a ghost. Luca, I was dead. I was walking around, but I was dead inside. I was terrified of men, of bills, of my own shadow. She wrenched her hands free and grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. You saved me. You woke me up. You made me feel alive. You think a bullet scares me more than the life I had? You think your father scares me more than never feeling safe, ever? Don't you dare. Don't you push me away. You are mine. You hear me? Her words broke him. The cold, hard mask of the killer, the underboss, the sun. It shattered. He collapsed into her, his forehead resting against hers, his body shaking with a single, ragged sob that he choked back. They will not stop. Nina, he whispered, his voice thick with defeat. They will never stop. Then we will not stop, she whispered back, her hands in his hair. We will run. We will fight. But we will do it together. That night, their passion was not the frantic, desperate hunger of the car. It was not the overwhelming, tear-filled discovery of their first time. It was a confirmation. It was a promise. It was tender and painful and achingly slow. He tended to his own wound, his movements practiced and grim. Then he came to her, his shirt off, and she saw him. His torso was a map of his life, old scars, puckered and white, from knives. 2 small, round scars from bullets she had not known about. She lay on the bed, and he lay beside her, his body a familiar, dangerous weight. Her fingers, trembling, traced the long, faded scar that ran along his ribs. What was this one? She whispered. A disagreement, he said, his voice rough. About territory. She kissed it, her lips soft. Does it hurt? Not anymore. He breathed. He found her hand. His thumb brushed over the faint, pale mark on her wrist, the one Ray had left. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed the scar, a gesture of such profound, possessive tenderness that her heart ached. No one, he whispered, his lips moving against her skin, touches you again. No one. Unless it's me. It was a vow, a promise of a life of violence and protection, of danger and devotion, and she accepted it. The next morning, the mood was sober. They were a single unit, a 2-person army against the world. He gave her a new burner phone, a slim, anonymous black rectangle. This is clean, he said. My number is the only one in it. If I call you, and I do not say the word sunset in the first 5 seconds, you hang up and you run. If I tell you to go, you take Mateo and you go. No questions. You do not wait for me. You just go. He looked at her, his eyes dark and deadly serious. Promise me, Nina. She nodded. I promise. But her eyes, as she met his gaze, told a different story. She was done running without him. Miles away, in a smoke-filled back room, a different alliance was being forged. Officer Derek Shaw, his face a mottled, sweaty red of desperation, sat across from a man with his arm in a sling. He's made me, Shaw hissed, his hands shaking. The feds are sniffing around. That bastard with the tires. It was him. I know it was. I'm ruined. Marco took a long drag of his cigarette, his eyes cold and assessing. You want him. I want the girl. He's weak, but he's not stupid. He's hidden her. I know where he'll be, Shaw said, leaning in, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. He's got the girl's brother. He's got the grandmother at St. Jude's. He won't leave them. And he hasn't left the cafe. He's still watching it. He's arrogant. Marco smiled, a thin, cruel slash in his bandaged face. Arrogant, good. We can use that. You want him, you help me get her. And we'll get them both. The burner phone vibrated against the hard plastic of the hospital waiting room chair. Nina snatched it up, her heart leaping into her throat. She'd been at St. Jude's for 8 hours, watching the slow, agonizing beep of the heart monitor connected to her abuela. Mateo was asleep in the chair next to her, his head on her shoulder. "Hello?" she whispered, stepping into the hallway. It was not Luca. The voice was gruff, one she did not recognize. "You Nina?" "Yes. Who is this?" "Friend of the man you're with. He's not answering. I've been watching. The cousin, Marco. He's with a cop, a local uniform. They're not at the safe house. They're moving." "Moving where?" Nina's hand tightened on the phone. "The cafe," the voice said, and her blood ran cold. "They've got men inside. They're planning a party. Your man, he's arrogant. He's still watching the place. He's walking right into it." The line clicked dead. She looked at the phone, her mind racing. Luca was not answering his burner. Of course he was not. He was hunting. He was watching. He was being arrogant, just as Officer Shaw had said. She shook Mateo awake, her movements rough with panic. "Maddie, wake up!" He grogged, his eyes blurry. "Nina, what's wrong? Is it Abuela?" "She's fine," Nina lied, her voice shaking. "Listen to me. I have to go. You stay here. You lock this door. You sit with her, and if you do not hear from me in 1 hour, you call the police. You call that Agent Harris. You understand?" "Nina, what's going on?" he said, the fear clearing his head. You're scaring me." "Just do it, Mateo," she hissed. She grabbed her purse, the heavy weight of Luca's gun, a cold, terrifying reassurance at the bottom. She ran. She did not wait for a bus. She ran into the street and flagged a cab, her voice a frantic shout. "The Seaside Cafe. As fast as you can. I'll give you $100. The cab ride was a blur of neon and terror. She tried Luca's phone again, and again nothing. He was there. He had to be. He was walking into a trap, and she was the only one who could stop him. The cab screeched to a halt a block away. "This is as close as I can get. Lady, looks like the street's blocked." She threw a handful of bills at him and jumped out. The street was quiet, too quiet. The usual late-night thrum of tourists and music was gone. It was just the sound of the ocean, a low, ominous whisper. She saw his car, the black rental, parked in the shadows across the street. He was not in it. He was here. She started to run, her keys clutched in her hand like a weapon, her other hand deep in her purse. "Nina, wait!" She spun around. Mateo. He must have followed her. He must have taken another cab. He was running toward her, his face pale with terror. "Nina, don't! It's a trap!" "Mateo, no!" she screamed. "Get back! Go home!" But it was too late. Her scream, his shout. They had sprung the trap. A figure stepped out of the cafe's front door. Not a customer. Officer Derek Shaw, his service weapon in his hand, a greedy, triumphant smile on his face. "Romano!" he yelled into the night. "We know you're out there. We have your girl and her kid brother. Come on out, you bastard, or they get it first." From an alley across the street, a shadow detached itself from the darkness. Luca. He had been there all along, watching. He saw Nina. He saw Mateo. His face was a mask of cold, terrible fury. "Let them go, Shaw," Luca said, his voice a low growl that carried across the empty street. He stepped into the light, his hands empty, at his sides. "Not a chance," Shaw sneered. "This ends tonight." From inside the cafe, 2 more men burst out, guns drawn, Marco's men, and then Marco himself, his arm in a sling, a cruel, vicious smile on his face. "Cousin," Marco called out, "you came, just in time to watch your weakness die." Mateo, in a move of pure, stupid 16-year-old bravery, did the one thing he should not have done. He ran. He ran at Shaw. "You leave her alone!" "Mateo!" Nina shrieked. It all happened at once. Shaw, startled, raised his gun toward the running boy. Luca, with a roar, moved faster than she had ever seen him move. He was not running toward Shaw. He was running toward Mateo. Shots rang out, not one, a dozen, a deafening explosion of noise that ripped the night apart. Luca did not have his gun. He must have left it in the car. He did the only thing he could. He tackled Mateo, his body a living shield, shoving the boy behind a concrete planter just as the bullets flew. Luca's body jerked, a violent, unnatural spasm. He grunted, a deep, guttural sound of impact, and then he was still. his body half covering Mateo's. "Luca!" Nina's scream was not a sound of fear, it was a sound of rage. Shaw was advancing, his gun still raised, aimed at the unmoving lump of Luca's body. "Well," he panted, "that was easy." He did not see her. She was in the shadows. She had the gun in her hand. She had never fired a gun in her life, but she had seen Luca. She knew how he held it. She knew how he stood. She was not a killer. She was a protector. "Hey!" she shouted. Shaw spun around, his eyes wide, surprised. "You—" She raised the gun, two-handed, just as she had seen in the movies, just as her body instinctively knew. Her hands were shaking, but her gaze was steady. She did not aim for his head. She did not aim for his chest. She aimed for his leg. She pulled the trigger. The gun exploded in her hand, the recoil slamming her shoulder. But her aim was true. Shaw screamed, a high-pitched, agonizing sound, and collapsed, his gun clattering on the pavement. He clutched his thigh, blood pouring between his fingers. The other men, Marco included, froze. They heard it at the same time she did. Sirens, not one. A dozen, Luca's cleaner, his friend on the phone. They had been watching all along. Marco grabbed one of his men. "Get me out of here!" He did not care about the fight. He just wanted to escape. He bundled into a car and sped off, leaving Shaw screaming and bleeding on the sidewalk. Nina did not watch him go. She dropped the gun. She ran to Luca. She fell to her knees, pulling his heavy, limp body off of Mateo. Mateo was crying, hysterical. He saved me. It's okay, Maddie," she said, her voice a strange, calm whisper. She turned Luca over. His eyes were open, but they were dull. His shirt was soaked. A dark, black-red stain was spreading from his back. His chest, there was so much blood. "No," she whispered, her hands hovering over the wound, not knowing what to do. "No, no, no." She cradled his head in her lap, her tears dripping onto his pale, sweat-soaked face. "Luca, Luca, look at me. Stay with me." His eyes flickered. He focused on her. A small, pained smile touched his lips. "You shot. A cop," he wheezed. "You don't get to leave me now," she sobbed, her voice breaking. "I saved you. You're mine. You don't get to leave me." His eyes closed. The sirens were deafening. The hospital was a white, sterile hell. They would not let her see him. He was in surgery. Mateo, in shock, was giving a statement to a detective. Nina just sat, her clothes stiff with Luca's drying blood, her mind empty. Agent Harris found her there. "He's a brave kid," he said, nodding toward Mateo. "And you're a hell of a shot." "Is he—" "He's in surgery," Harris said, his voice gentle. "He's got the best, but he's bad. Nina, he took 3 bullets. One of them was close to his spine." She just stared ahead. 6 hours later, a surgeon, his face gray with exhaustion, came out. "He's alive," he said. "He's strong as an ox. The next 24 hours are critical, but he's alive." She was at his bedside when he woke up. He was pale, a web of tubes and wires connecting him to a symphony of beeping machines. A police guard was stationed outside his door. She just held his hand, her thumb stroking his knuckles. She kissed his forehead, his cheek, his eyelids. "You don't get to leave me now," she whispered again, a mantra. A nurse brought a secure phone in on his 3rd day. "This was delivered," the nurse said, her eyebrows raised. "The man said it's a family emergency." Nina answered it. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was like gravel and old money. "So, you are the one." It was him, the father. "You are the weakness," the voice rasped, "that has undone my son." Nina was silent, her blood cold. Luca stirred, his eyes clearer now, finding hers. He held out his hand. She gave him the phone. "Father," he said, his voice a hoarse, painful whisper. There was a long silence as the man on the other end spoke. Nina watched Luca's face. It was not the face of a son. It was the face of an adversary. "A liability," Luca said, his voice gaining a sliver of its old ice. "You think she's a weakness. You think I'm not a Romano." He took a ragged breath, his eyes finding Nina's. He held her gaze, a silent, powerful communication. "You're right," Luca said, his voice suddenly hard as steel. She is my weakness." He paused, a small, cold smile touching his lips. "So I guess I'll burn your kingdom to the ground to keep her safe." He hung up. The click of the phone, an act of war. Agent Harris came the next day. He sat by the bed. "Your father is sending a team. Luca, not to test you, to finish you, and her." He looked at Nina. "You two are the biggest targets in the country right now, but I have an offer." He turned back to Luca. "Turn on him. Give us the Romano Empire. Names, dates, accounts, everything. You testify. You give us your father." "And what do I get?" Luca rasped. "Full immunity for you," Harris said. "And for her, we'll protect you. Full witness protection, a new life, a real one. You'll be ghosts." Luca turned his head, his pride a tangible thing. "I am not a rat. You're a dead man," Harris said, standing. "And she's a dead woman. Think about it." He left. The room was silent. Nina stood up, her back aching from the hospital chair. She looked at the man she had saved, the man she had shot a cop for. "He's right, Luca," she said, her voice quiet but steel hard. "You have to. It's not my way. Betrayal." "Legacy?" she said, her voice rising. "Your father tried to have you killed. He sent his son to test you, and he used my grandmother as the pawn. That is not legacy. That is not family. That is a death sentence. And I did not hold you in my arms while you bled out in an alley, just so you could throw your life away for a name." She grabbed his hand. "You're a new man, Luca, the man who saved my brother, the man who I love. That man chooses life. He doesn't choose a legacy of ghosts. Choose me. Choose life." He stared at her, his dark eyes searching hers. He saw the fire, the strength, the woman who had faced down his world and had not broken. He reached for the phone. He called Harris. "I'm in." The fall of the Romano Empire was not a gunshot. It was an earthquake. It was quiet. And then it was devastating. Headlines, arrests, the old man, his face a mask of stone, led away in handcuffs, and then silence. Luca and Nina, Matteo and Abuela, they vanished. They became ghosts. The sun was hot, the sand white. The sound of the ocean was a gentle, rhythmic shush. A small, brightly painted bar sat just off the beach, its sign reading, El Nuevo Amanecer, the new dawn. Nina was barefoot, a simple white sundress swirling around her knees, her hair long and free, her skin kissed by the sun. She carried a tray of colorful drinks to a laughing table of tourists. Behind the bar, a man, shirtless, tan, and devastatingly handsome, was slicing limes. A long, puckered scar ran along his back, a faint white line just visible. He watched her, his eyes full of a quiet, possessive love. She finished and walked back to the bar, her hips swaying. She leaned over the counter. He came to her, wiping his hands. He leaned in, his lips brushing the side of her neck, his warm breath sending a familiar shiver down her spine. "You know," he whispered, his voice a low, happy rumble. "You teased me into falling for you." She turned, her arms wrapping around his neck. She smiled, a bright, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Good," she replied, her voice soft. "Now you're mine." She pulled him down for a kiss. It was not a kiss of hunger, or fear, or desperation. It was a kiss of peace, of forever. They were free. They were safe. They were in love. Thank you so much for listening to our story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Nina and Luca. I would love to know where in the world you are listening from. So please, drop a comment and let me know. If you love stories like this, please consider subscribing to our channel, Mafia Romance Stories, for more passionate and thrilling tales. And finally, share your thoughts in the comments. What was your favorite part of their story? I cannot wait to read what you think.